So Indy, again, when we looked at your deck and you showed us the supplier ecosystem and how you dealt with changes in that system and how you allocated resources and priorities to different suppliers, how do the global and local differences in RS, in the organization itself, play out in the tension of implementing that strategy across countries? Or is there a centralized system that just imposes that on local teams and, you know, executes and gets the compliance needed? Could you give us a bit of a perspective on that?
Yeah, sure. So the way we're set up at RS is in terms of local markets and their responsibilities. They obviously focus in their market, and like they work with the sales teams in market, and they work with they have their own specific budgets around marketing activity, and that might typically be things like print advertising, maybe some very small display campaigns with local suppliers and whatnot. But and they're also responsible for the media budget overall for their specific geographic location. So whilst we spend PPC budget centrally with the centralized team, the owners of that budget is the local market. So when it comes to media spend and display and PPC, it's owned by the local market, but it's executed by the centralized team in London. Now, when it comes to things like technology, that's where it's slightly different, and we actually centralize the whole process when it comes to technology. So technology budget, the implementation, everything around this at RS is centralized either in London or our other office location, which is in a town called Corby. So a lot of our website development teams, for example, and our back-end engineers, they're all centralized and work in the UK. So a lot of the decision making around the technology that we use, it's all centralized, and I will work with the centralized teams in London who work in paid search and display and social to make sure that we're picking the right vendor. The local market typically doesn't really get involved with that, mainly because it's not their area of expertise. But also, they're not really interested in what technology we use. They're interested in the end results. They're interested in their challenges being solved. So typically, the teams that spend the media budget and make those decisions around bidding and whatnot, they'll work with the local market to understand what the challenges are in their market, and they'll relay that back to me, or I might work directly with marketing director in France, for example, to talk about their challenges. And then I'll have a think about, or I'll work with some teams directly in the UK to try and figure out how we solve that. So that's how it works at RS.
Thanks so much, Indy. Just going a little bit further into that then, I mean, you know, what are the tensions between what you might call immediate margin priorities and then the longer term growth and efficiency measurements in a complex MarTech system like RS is managing? You know, how are those tensions resolved between, you know, as we might say, immediate margin priority and the long-term health of the efficiency of working at scale to make overall profit year by year by year? A little bit on that and how you deal with that at RS.
Yeah, it's a balance. It's definitely difficult. Being able to prioritize what you work on and what you introduce into a technology ecosystem and what you work on to try and improve, you have to balance out the long term and the short term. My team was initially set up because of that long-term issue. The fact that at RS and many companies globally, they're not thinking long-term. They're thinking about how can I survive today, especially now, and how can I survive maybe tomorrow, but they're not thinking about the day after tomorrow. They're not thinking about next year or 5 years down the line, even 10 years down the line, because typically the teams that are executing the campaigns in marketing, especially, they have to deliver now. They're tied to budgets, they're tied to results that they need to perform right now. So it's very difficult for them to dedicate any time to think about that long term, and that's kind of why my team was formed in that in the first place, because we needed a team that could focus on the long term. So typically, whilst I do support with short term objectives, we help out. We previously have helped out a lot with bid management and scaling in affiliates and display. A lot of my role now today sits in that long term, thinking about 2-3 years ahead, and basically trying to implement the technologies and trying to bring teams together and bring our data together so that we can win next year, in 2 years, in 5 years time, not just today. So I don't get bothered with questions about, okay, our margin's down today, what can you do about it? Yeah. Unfortunately, some of my colleagues in the marketing teams will get that question. Me and my team basically get time and space to brief and think about what do we need to be doing, and luckily we get a lot of buy-in with senior stakeholders who allow us that opportunity to do that. But yeah, we work closely with the media execution teams to try and help their short-term goals as well. So it's a balancing act, which is quite difficult, and a lot of companies have that challenge.
Absolutely, that's fascinating. And Indy, you know, what does RS Components as an organization look for from external suppliers in ad tech and martech in kind of cultural terms? Obviously, the technology has to be scanned and evaluated, and there's obviously a testing process. And I should say to everybody in the group that smec supplies RS Components for its Google Shopping automation bids. And we've done that in a testing period that lasted almost 24 months. And I think we are now the primary supplier of Google Shopping to Google Shopping outcomes to RS Components. But we obviously, the eye does not see itself. So we feel like we know RS pretty well. But if we were coming in today, or another supplier was coming in today, what cultural triggers do you look for in the companies and people you want to be working with at RS Components, beyond just the technology? And on the other side of that coin, what negative triggers do you look out for when you are starting to deal with or go through an evaluation process with a potential supplier?
Really, really good questions. And I'm sure a lot of people who are tuning into this, who work in this sort of space across digital marketing, have the same issue that I get inundated with many LinkedIn messages, many emails, random emails. God knows how they get my email address. But as I've shown in that slide before, there's 7,000 to 8,000 suppliers out there, all vying for key people's in organizations' business. So there's a lot of noise, and it's very difficult for someone who works at a company to figure out when is the time to filter out that noise and ignore it, because you can't answer everyone's request, and you can't have phone calls, scoping calls with every single person out there, because I would never get anything done if that was the case. And when to actually listen and think, okay, this is someone I should be talking to. And a lot of the time, it's all about timing. Yeah. As I mentioned, it's about solving business challenges and having those use cases already. So if I have a challenge today and someone pings me on LinkedIn to say, look, I have some technology that does this, this, and that, all in one message, it would be great to hear more about RS Components, so I think we could work with you quite well. And it happens to be something I need a problem addressing right now or very soon, I would probably speak to that person quite soon as well. Whereas if it's something that it might be an issue at RS, but it's not something we're focusing on until a few years down the line, because it's just not of high priority for us. It's not going to be that game changer for our business at this moment in time. It'll be something I might ignore and then pick up later on down the line, or it just might not be relevant to me right now. In terms of triggers, which kind of turns it, I guess it's a difficult question to answer, especially with salespeople on the line as well, possibly tuning in. But I'd say it's more about listening and less about talking. When you're having the scoping sessions, it's about listen to what the challenges are from your client or from the business that you're trying to win business with, and really, really understand and get into the nuts and bolts of what that person is dealing with today, tomorrow, and what they're trying to solve in the future. And then try and understand, okay, where does my technology fit in with that? Where could I help? Where do they already have technology that can do this? In which case, probably my technology isn't that relevant to push on to this person. So if you're able to understand that and then able to articulate where your technology actually has value for that person, once you get that scoping session call in the diary, that's where the hook is in for me. And that's where I'll start thinking about, okay, we could actually work with this technology partner going forwards.
Thank you very much, Indy. That's really great stuff.